So hello, everyone. My name's Kim Wiley. I have 15 years of experience in marketing. I started my career at marketing agencies and have moved through the tech industry, including at Meta and Pinterest. After that, I then went ahead and started my own business where I was the founder and CMO of my own business and brand called Casa Caravan, which I sold back in December. Since then, have had the pleasure of working with the team here at Light as part of my consulting work, but I am also the global brand director over at Captivate, which is an influencer platform, meaning that I get to every day work with influencers in the digital space to help build their brands and connect with larger brands across the world to actually promote messaging, marketing messaging on behalf of large brands. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So today we're going to be generally discussing Marketing 101. This is an opportunity for us to really dive in and learn about the importance of marketing skills that are needed to build your own brand. As I discussed a little bit about me, so if you guys are curious or want to know more, always feel free to reach out to me. My email address is provided at the end of the presentation, but I'm always happy to help field any questions you guys may have while navigating the marketing space. So just in general today, for us to kind of level set and understand, we will be focusing on a few areas to ensure that you guys kind of cover off on everything you really need to know in terms of what is personal branding, why investing in personal branding is important. Is it time that is going to be well spent for you? Absolutely. How to do it, right? We all want to know exactly how to do it, how to get our names, our own personal brands out there, how in order to scale our businesses. Building that on social media as social media continues to grow with over 147 minutes every day on average spent by people on social media. It is where the most time is consumed. So understanding why the time on social media is so important and critical to your brand. We'll get into those details. And then obviously, lastly, not only is building your brand important, but then understanding moving into this new space of NFTs and Web3, how that, or are there any things that are shifting and changing? We want to make sure that we address those two at a high level. Again, this is meant to be high level. We're not going to get too much in the weeds, but if you do have any specific questions, feel free to throw them in the Q&A, and we will try to address them either today or after the webinar. So what is personal branding? Personal branding really is just an opportunity for us to really control our own messaging in market. It's a process in which we actually define ourselves to our audience and what our unique values truly are in order to leverage that across all platforms that we engage with our audiences on. We want to ensure that there's consistent messaging. Consistency, not only in our messaging, but in the cadence in which we actually connect with our core audience is really critical to ensure that you actually drive your business forward. If folks hear from you sometimes, but they don't hear from you at others, that inconsistency will create gaps in your own personal brand, as well as in their engagement with you, which typically drives sales down instead of sales up. So as photographers or individuals looking to really grow your brand, you want to ensure that you're being consistent and that messaging is consistent across the board. So why is personal branding so important? Your brand is really an extension of your work. All of you are hyper successful individuals with an amazing work product. We want to ensure that we're giving you all the tools possible to allow your brand to be an extension of the amazing work that you're creating, and that you're getting eyeballs on the work in order to then ideally then continue to sell it. As we all know, the space is very noisy. There is over 7 times as much content in the market, meaning across all social networks, than there are hours in the day. So when we actually look at that, we want to make sure that we help you not only not become a commodity in that marketplace, but also that you're having that opportunity to break through the noise with your messaging that is very personal to you and who you are and what the work product is that you're putting out into the market. Secondly is having a disadvantage compared to others. So if you do not have a brand, you are at a disadvantage because you are competing against so much other content and so many other people who do have powerful brands in market. That is anything from large Fortune 50 companies all the way down to small businesses. The more consistent you are with that messaging, the more loyalty you're going to bring to your personal brand and to your work. And thirdly, without having a personal brand, you're going to limit your reach. There's a general rule of thumb in the marketing world, and we call it reach and frequency. So we'll get a little bit more into that, but it's really important to understand who you're reaching, how often you're reaching them, and with what message you're reaching them with. So in order to not limit that reach of your potential audience and to get your work into as many people in front of as many people as possible, we want to make sure that your brand stands out and that you have that defined so it's easy for you to execute on it. So how to invest in your brand. It's really important to understand the 4 steps of the branding process. From here, you'll really understand how to discover your brand, how to develop it, how to communicate the brand, and then how to maintain it. If you follow these 4 steps, it allows this to become a more turnkey process for you without it feeling like it becomes overwhelming. Oftentimes when folks step into this world of branding themselves, their personal brand and their business, it can feel overwhelming. So by following these 4 steps, it's really meant to kind of just break down and tackle each of these steps individually to ensure that this process becomes easy for you. Self-impression or the perception that the market has on you is really the first piece of this. So we really need to deal with this first in order to discover who your brand is. Your personal branding is truly a state of mind, so you have to make it a priority. If this isn't a priority in your day-to-day, I highly recommend that you look for marketing professionals in the market who can help you do it. All of this branding work can be farmed out to marketing professionals if it's something that you do not have time or want to focus on, but feel like it is important to scale your business. There are folks in the market who can help you do exactly that. But your personal branding should be a priority and be consistent throughout all of your messaging and your day-to-day activity across your brand. And then always remembering the basics. When you sit down to start thinking about what your personal brand should look like, these are the 3 questions you really should answer. This keeps it simple. You can answer these questions. You can start implementing this in all of the tactical elements that you put into play throughout your day. So who are you? What do you do? And what makes you unique? This will allow you to define what your voice is in market. This will allow you to understand what your actual true core values are, what your mission and your vision is for your brand. So by being able to answer these questions, you'll then be able to start elaborating on these elements and start taking them as just thoughts and into tactics and putting them into the market. So step 1, discover your brand. So when we're thinking about discovering your brand, we want to break it down in ways that feel very organic and authentic to you. Your brand should truly be that reflection of yourself. So we want to think about the insights about you specifically. What are your goals? What are those personal drivers that get you into market as photographers, taking pictures, creating beautiful art, connecting with the world around you, building community, whatever those personal drivers are, they should be reflected in your brand. So getting them on paper, getting them in front of you to understand what those insights about you are critical to defining and discovering what this brand is actually going to look like. Again, we spoke about earlier, the values. What core values do you bring as a business, as an artist, to your community that you want to make sure are reflected? Are there specific topics that you're passionate about? If there are passion points that you want to ensure are reflected, whether it is specific about your art, whether it's about the community that you're involved in, nonprofits, etc., any of those things that make your passion and are reflected in your art, we want to make sure that those are elevated when thinking about and defining your brand. Again, other questions can be things like, what are you known for, and what do you have to answer to? So all of these elements are insights about you that you should consider when thinking about you and your personal brand. After you've thought about you from and your brand from your own perspective, shifting that over to what the market thinks about you, what some of your existing customers may think about you, or friends and family, etc. So finding out those insights from others, doing that market research as it relates to what others have had to say about you and how they perceive you currently, is really critical to finalizing and structuring that final brand product for yourself. If what you hear from the market in terms of what they think about you doesn't align with what you think about yourself, that's a pretty good indicator that your brand hasn't been defined quite yet. And that therefore shifting the public's perception of your brand will be critical in making sure that your brand is consistent moving forward. Step 2 is developing your brand. So identifying your target audience is really important to ensure that when you actually put all of these elements into tactical form, that you are speaking to the right people. There are pieces like writing a bio, your website, your social profiles, and the bios that exist in your social profiles that are really important to developing your brand in this stage. So you want to understand that unique value proposition. You want to be able to be the go-to person in your genre. You want to have those brand attributes, those strengths that you can lean on to say, this is who I am, and this is why my positioning is unique in the market. Defining your target audience is the first step in doing that. It is extremely critical for all of you to think about who you're talking to, when you're talking to them, and how you're talking to them. So when you think about the shift from maybe a more traditional art space, maybe into the NFT space, this is an opportunity to think about potentially expanding your target audience into something beyond what maybe you have done previously. So it's really understanding what your core audience is from your existing audience. What are the attributes? What are they looking for? What are they in market actually trying to buy? Are they trying to expand a relationship with artists? Are they looking to expand community? Are they pure collectors? Or are they futurists? Are they NFT collectors? Have they dabbled in kind of the higher art space? Or have they traditionally been more digitally art focused? If they're digitally art focused, that messaging, again, will probably need to be different than your traditional collector. So when thinking about that target audience and really breaking it down, it is going to be important to understand who they are and how your message is being delivered to them and how they are perceiving it. So step 3 is all about how you communicate your brand. This is where we get into all the fun tactics. So creating a communication plan is really important to understanding how your message is actually going to be delivered. There are a handful of tangible elements within the communication plan, as well as some intangibles. So here are elements that you should consider from the tangible perspective. You have your personal website. This can also include any additional content that is created, as well as social networks. So your personal website should be very clean, should be very simple, and should allow people to know exactly what you want them to do when they get there. If you do not have a personal website, there are a ton of great, very low touch options that you can actually use to build your own site. That could be anything from a Squarespace and a Wix that you can do yourself. Or again, there are a ton of options in market for web developers who can easily stand up websites on your behalf to get your brand out there in market and be front and center. By doing this, this helps with other elements like SEO, which is search engine optimization, because if your website is out there, then you will obviously rank higher within platforms, let's say like Google, when people are searching for either your specific genre of photography and art, or potentially when they're looking also within the NFT space. So we want to make sure that your brand is out there and is a reflection of your work at all times. On your website, you should also always consider having very strong content that is correlated to the content you're putting out in other places. So that's where we get into number 2 of the tangible element, which is content. Content isn't necessarily just the amazing art that you guys are creating, but it's also all the other supporting content that is created in order to build your brand. This can be blogs. This can also be all the content that is pushed out to social media. This is also an opportunity for you guys to really dive deep and think about what your bios look like. Your bios within your own website and or blogs are going to be different than, let's say, your bios within social media. Typically, a good rule of thumb and a best practice that we typically use is short bios should be about 200 to 300 words, and they should really focus in on who you are, your name, your accomplishments. They should also have a ton of personality, making sure that your personality and the personality of your work and the mission and vision that you have for the art that you are creating, it should be reflected in your bio. It should not feel static. It should not feel stale. It should really be a reflection of your personality through and through. And you should be able to tell people where to find more information. So great rule of thumb is kind of covering off on those 3 elements within your bios to ensure that you and your brand stand out. And also remember, most bios for professional reasons are also written in third person. The difference is when you start getting into social networks, which is our next topic of tangible elements. Everyone should be and have a presence across social networks. One of the great things to think about is what we spoke about earlier is your target audience. Understanding where your target audience is, being that they are spending close to 3 hours of their day across social networks, thinking about who your target audience is and which of those social networks they spend their time on will help you narrow down which social networks you should actually be on. With over 7 social networks currently in play on a day-to-day basis for most individuals, and with that growing as the NFT and Web3 space grows, as a marketer, I always encourage my clients to not become overwhelmed by the mass opportunity on social, but really start by just focusing in on the networks that are most important to their core audience. From there, it's easy to expand once you've already defined your brand and start kind of pushing out content to additional social networks, but really focusing in on the ones that matter to your audience during specific campaign flights or specific pushes that you have for your work will help you narrow down your efforts and streamline your day-to-day marketing. So thinking about the different platforms and audiences from Facebook to YouTube really being kind of an opportunity for people to consume a lot of content, where on Instagram, folks are there to engage more with, let's say, art, photography, as well as, sharing their own photos and images. There is kind of the both push and pull on something like an Instagram. Pinterest is obviously there for discovery. So thinking about what those discovery moments are for people on Pinterest, if your art fits into those life stages of those discovery moments, that might be a platform for you to want to consider. LinkedIn, obviously being a platform for you to grow your personal and professional network, is a great opportunity to also kind of participate in a community that is more focused on the more professional piece of our day-to-day lives. TikTok being obviously the fastest growing platform in the market. It is changing and it changes quickly, just like the rest of them. We are all subject to the algorithms and the changing algorithms, and the fact that none of them are the same does make for some challenges. So understanding how those audiences and what they're participating in will help you kind of navigate each of those algorithms. And then obviously working in the NFT space and moving into that space, having to also consider additional community engagement on other platforms like Discord and Reddit, and any of the additional messaging platforms where NFT collectors are currently playing in, will be important for you guys to understand as well. So intangibles we've discussed a little bit previously. These are the areas where in building and communicating your brand is going to be really important. This is what's going to feed into the content that you're actually pushing out to your website, to your social networks. This is where you have an opportunity to allow your brand to grow and breathe. This can be very flexible. This can and is meant to be something that is shifted and adjusted with you and your personal business. So thinking about what your mission, everyone should have a mission statement for their business, a vision, and those values at least written down so that you can constantly reflect back to them when you are creating the content for your personal website and for social media. And lastly, the last step is to always maintain your brand. What most folks struggle with is this step. This is a step that I see most people having the hardest time with. So once they think that their brand is created, once they get their business out into market and their personal brand that they feel like has been defined, what they forget to do is actually maintain it. Maintaining your brand can feel a little tedious, but it is really important because this is where you're going to see the most growth and improvement as you move your brand through the market. Being consistent is one of the most critical things that any brand can do. That is from a business to a personal brand. Social media algorithms will always reward you for it. So when you think about social media platforms, their objective is to get people to spend as much time as possible on their platforms. So the algorithms are built, and I cannot say this strongly enough, they are built to reward you for consistency. So the more consistent you are with your messaging on the social platforms that you are using, the better performance you will see over time. You might see fall-offs if algorithms change and shift, but that is what optimization is for. But the algorithm will always reward you for being consistent. So I cannot stress that enough. Coming up with that consistent plan to communicate and build a community with not only your community, but with let's say the light community is going to be critical in long-term success. Access to your brand regularly. You should really work on assessing your brand as often as possible, because conducting those social media audits will help you understand what your audience is connecting with and what they're not, and how you should be spending your time communicating with them. So this optimization process and this feedback loop between yourself and your core audience will help you ensure that the time you spend building your brand and marketing yourself and your work is as efficient and as effective as possible. So on a regular basis, I typically recommend that my clients do it at first every 3 months. Once they become more proficient at it, every 6 months, to know that what they're putting in market is actually being received and engaged with by their audience, and that they're achieving their true KPIs. Next is gathering feedback. You really want to use the insights that are provided to you from your website, from Google Analytics, from social media platforms to understand what is working and what isn't. So this isn't just auditing your platforms as a whole, but this is on a regular basis looking to see what insights you can gather from all of the areas of publication that you have and where your brand lives. So using insights to understand what is connecting with your audience will be critical to ensuring that you are maintaining your brand at the highest performing level as possible. And then evolving and staying relevant. Again, your target audience is going to change as you grow your business. You might find new areas of opportunity, new niches, new target audiences within your larger addressable audience that you want to message very specifically. So as their use cases change, so should yours. You want to keep the messaging consistent, but you want to make sure that you're evolving with people's needs to maximize all of your efforts. A great example is watching a lot of brands and a lot of personal brands shift into the space of TikTok, as TikTok has changed the way that brands are communicating with people. Brands have had to adjust how they message. Again, personal brands, individuals who are brands, as well as larger brands who are selling products and services, have all had to make this adjustment with how consumers are changing. Consumers are actually looking for people to have more authentic, more genuine conversations than just pushing out messaging. So making sure that you see that and you adjust accordingly to your target audience will help you achieve and maximize your efforts, and ideally sell as much art as possible to the right collector. So I know that there are some folks asking questions around what social media audit can look like. So social media audits really come down to getting into each of your profiles, and there are a lot of templates out. If you Google social media audits, there are a ton of templates out there that basically allow you to kind of go step by step through what questions you should be able to answer. But it really is getting into each of your profiles, looking to see what has performed, what hasn't performed, what times of day your content performs best. And we'll get a little bit more into that in a few steps in terms of the next step, which is understanding social media a little bit better. But really it is an opportunity for you to look not only at your social media presence, but also we'll call them quote unquote competitors, like not necessarily competition, but who else is in the space doing something really well, what kind of performance they see. So a social media audit would let you go through all of those steps. And I highly recommend, if you haven't done one before and you're not working with a marketing professional, that you Google a social media audit and use an existing template to get comfortable with the process. So building your social media strategy. Having a social media strategy is a great place to start. This will help you actually start thinking about what you're going to put into the market. So once you've already built your brand and you understand what your mission is, your vision is, what your tone and voice are in market, this will give you a chance to put all of that into practice and start creating content around it that is specific to social media. Again, each social media platform is unique. So you want to make sure you're setting those goals that make sense for your business based on the platform. Once you kind of set those goals and you understand what those goals are, so we'll take a step here and talk about goals a little bit more. So goals are an opportunity for you to think about what you're trying to achieve with the platform. This can be anything from increasing awareness or generating sales to growing your audience and building community. So in the NFT world, it's a great opportunity to think about what your community engagement plan is going to be, what the goals around that should look like. The other area to consider when setting goals is where you want to drive people to. Oftentimes, most of us want to be able to have an opportunity to actually sell the products that we are marketing, our brand, our art. And so driving traffic and understanding where you're driving traffic to should be part of your goal setting process. Any questions around what the goal should be within your social platforms? I want to make sure we answer these live because typically there are a handful of questions on setting goals for platforms.
Not yet, Kim, but if anyone has any questions, just make sure you throw them in the Q&A and we'll get to them, and I'll flag them when they pop up, Kim.
Sounds good. So once you've set your goals, number 2 is taking time to research your target audience. We've talked about target audiences here already today, because they are important in setting your personal brand as well. But taking the time to research your target audience on platform is also very important. Figuring out what groups, what communities they're already participating in, and participating alongside of them in those communities could help you learn a lot about who the target audience is and what they're actually looking for. This way, when you're putting out your messaging and your content on social media, you have an opportunity to reach them exactly how they want to be spoken to. This allows you to be as authentic as possible. Authenticity is absolutely key in all things in social media. Your website and blogs can feel a little bit more polished and very specific to your brand. But within social media, specifically within the NFT space, it is critical to make sure that you're being as authentic and true to your brand as possible, because most collectors, whether they are traditional collectors or NFT collectors, can kind of smell through the BS when it comes to overproduced brands. And what real people are really looking for is for artists to truly be authentic and true to who their brand is. So taking the time to understand who that target audience is, how they communicate, the language that they use will help you connect with them in a more real, authentic way, based on how they want to engage back with you. Number 3 is establishing the most important metrics and KPIs. So KPIs are key performance indicators for anyone who hasn't heard the term before. So this is what's going to allow you to understand what you're actually trying to achieve. So these KPIs should tie back to the goals that you've set. These KPIs could be things like reaching more people, driving more clicks, driving more engagement, hashtags. So understanding your hashtag strategy as part of this, as part of your KPIs, will be important. Understanding what your organic versus any paid support and any paid performance is. So the platforms all obviously have an opportunity to leverage paid media across the board. So anytime you guys ever want to use paid media on any of the social platforms, you can. This will allow you to extend your reach to a more targeted audience at any moment. And then you also have an opportunity to look at sentiment. Sentiment is really just how people are perceiving your brand. Is it a positive sentiment? Is it a negative sentiment? Are you gaining followers? Are you losing followers based on that? So understanding what each piece of your content that you're publishing on social media and what the actual KPI is for that will help you ensure that, again, all your time spent is being leveraged as best as possible. Then we get into content. Content is where people end up spending most of their time. The benefit that you guys all have is that you guys already produce amazing and beautiful content. But understanding how you're going to leverage that will help you create and streamline your time spent on social media. The way that I typically break this down for clients is in 3 areas. You want to create content pillars, which are going to be just kind of topics and thought starters for you. When you create this content strategy on social media, having those pillars will help you kind of narrow down what all of each piece of your content should look like. I typically recommend that folks brands start with either about 3 to 5 content pillars, so that you are consistent with your messaging, and that messaging can flow naturally and authentically throughout the course of, let's say, a month. That moves us into content calendars. Content calendars will allow you an opportunity to take all of those content pillars and map them directly day by day into a month calendar. Again, this helps you and is a forcing function for you to be as consistent as possible across the board, and will help kind of be that forcing function for you to remain consistent and accountable to your social networks and to your following and your community throughout the course of a month. And then from there, one of the ways to do this is to have content scheduling. For anyone who hasn't used a content or social media scheduler before, there are a lot of great options, and either free and or relatively inexpensive, specifically for personal brands, that allow you to go in and actually schedule all of your content across all of your platforms at once. So what I typically recommend and what I do for my clients is I sit down one day, I create a full month's worth of content for all of the platforms all at once for all of my clients. And then I sit down and I schedule them over the course of the month in a social media content scheduler. And this allows me to be very efficient with my time and their time. All of these schedulers also allow you to optimize, so don't feel like what you put in, you'll be stuck with for the entire month. If you see something is working or something within your business changes, all of that can be adjusted and changed on the fly. But this does allow you to sit down one day, knock out all of your content, all of your messaging, put it in a scheduler, and making sure that you are being consistent so that your messaging is getting out there on a regular basis. And that way, anytime you have real-time authentic messaging that you want to put out that just happens to be more impromptu, you still have the flexibility to do that too, but you don't feel like you need to come up with a piece of content every single day, because it will all already have been scheduled for you when you sit down to do it. Any questions on content pillars, calendars, or scheduling? For most folks, it can feel very overwhelming to have to create content and be consistent across the course of a month. So trying to create process in your marketing mix and your day-to-day business flow will help you be consistent. And again, the algorithms on social platforms will reward you for it.
Hey Kim, can you one quick question from me on the content scheduler you mentioned? What's your tool of choice, and what do you recommend?
It depends if we're talking small or large businesses.
Small.
Because I really like platforms like Later, and just because it is very cost efficient. But then I also, if you're doing multiple accounts at once, you can use things like Sprout is also a great option too.
Cool. Thank you.
Of course. Again, for most folks, when it comes down to a lot of these tools, is ensuring that it's cost efficient and effective, because none of this should be a burden on the business. It really should just be making your life easier. So something like a Later, which I recommend for small businesses, is a great opportunity because it is very cost efficient.
Hey Kim, one other question from Oz. Oz says in the chat, pillars, as I understand them, are 3 to 5 themes that our content falls into.
Yes. So great question, and great examples would be, you want to speak to, let's say one pillar, you want to speak directly to the purpose behind your art. The second may be a question of the day to your audience about what drives their interest in art, because it could be a great way for you to learn about your audience a little bit more. So this way it also builds community and engagement within your actual community itself. And like thirdly, it could be something like a promotion or an opportunity to discuss where your art is currently being sold. So thinking about it from like an awareness, engagement, and then a promotion is a great way to think about it. But you do want to make sure that it feels authentic to you and to your brand. If some folks when it comes to personal branding, some folks feel a little less comfortable talking about promotional elements. This can also be things like speaking engagements, this in terms of like education. This can also be just gallery showings. This can be reminding people that your NFTs are on sale. This could be cross promotion with something from your personal brand back to Light. Any of those opportunities to kind of remind yourself, hey, today I should probably talk about this topic, is what the pillar is really meant to achieve.
Great.
So as part of your content strategy, the one thing that we haven't covered yet that we've touched on previously is competitive analysis. Competitive analysis is a great thing to do during your social media audit, but it is something for you to be aware of in general. Being able to understand, again, what others are doing in the space that have similar brands to you, and see how, let's say, your content is comparing to theirs in terms of things like engagement, will help you understand, again, what your audience is engaging with, how your content is performing, and if there needs to be any shifts or adjustments or optimizations on your end. So competitive analysis and kind of keeping an eye on the landscape should be an important part of creating your content, let's say every month, every 2 weeks, or however you just choose to schedule it. It's a great way to kind of keep yourself accountable to the rest of the marketplace. Another piece of your content that you should be aware of, as well as kind of as you do your scheduling, is understanding the best time of day to post within every single one of these social platforms, as well as if you were to sign up for one of these social content tools, they all typically have an element of insights within them. So you can go to any of your platforms individually, or if you are in a tool, into their insights tab, and see how your content is performing and at what time of day and where you're getting the best performance. So that when you do schedule your content, understanding what time of day to schedule it based on your audience, again, where your audience lives across the world, how they engage, which platforms they engage with. You will see differences in each platform and the time of day in which to post. The general rule of thumb is kind of early morning before people get to work, depending on the time zone that your core audience is in, and then kind of that midday, and then late evening. Specifically when we're talking about platforms, let's say like Twitter, where folks do like to get on and start conversations in community, especially later after day as they're unwinding. So thinking about and looking to see how your audience is engaging with your content, what those insights in that data is telling you about your presence and the time spent, will help you be as timely as possible with your content and market. And again, if you are scheduling, you do still have the opportunity to post additional content on the fly. That is never a bad thing. More content, as long as it's authentic and well crafted, is not a bad thing. And all of this comes back to having all of this information for yourself allows you to optimize. So always, again, be looking to optimize and shift and grow with your audience and with your work to make sure that you are maximizing your time spent across all social networks. And one area that we haven't covered yet, which we'll cover in the next portion of NFT specifics, are community. So this is super high level. The NFT space can feel a little bit different for folks, so I don't want it to feel overwhelming at all. So if there are any questions, let's be very open and honest about them, because it is still very new to so many folks. But the NFT space has shifted the way that some communities are built and communicate. So I want to make sure that, since you guys are shifting into this space of selling art, not only traditionally to traditional collectors in the more traditional space, let's say galleries, etc., but also into the NFT space, that we understand what the opportunities are and what the different levers are for you guys to pull as you work your way into the NFT space as well, and have these collections. The one thing about the NFT space that is it's not different than traditional personal branding and or social media is understanding your audience. We touched on it a little bit in the beginning. The NFT space will give you a great opportunity to not only connect with the traditional collector, And that is where your core audience on your social networks will become so important to your overall messaging. But you'll also now have an opportunity to connect with NFT collectors and futurists and Web3 participants that may have not traditionally had exposure to your art. So understanding those two separate audiences and how to communicate to them will be really important as you move into this space, because your traditional collector is going to probably be one of your biggest advocates and will create a nice amount of hype to the within the NFT space to these new collectors as they explore not only digital art, but also fine art. So thinking about the tactics that kind of go into NFT, to the NFT space, you'll hear a lot of people talk about things like influencers and collabs, and scarcity and hype. All of those things are true, but again, all of them should make sure if you're using any of those tactics, or if anyone asks you about those tactics, that you are actually making sure that they ladder back to your personal brand and that they are a true reflection of your personal brand. What we typically see in the space is obviously the higher quality and the finer the art, there does typically become more scarcity. That obviously helps a lot of artists because that also can drive price, which is not a bad thing. But you need to make sure that the messaging and marketing around the message and market around your art is in line with your personal brand. And as it relates to things like influencers, influencers can tie directly back to community. I personally believe in the world that you guys are all participating in, not only with Light, but as your own personal brands, you also are your own personal influencers. You guys are also influencers for each other, and you guys are building a community that will not only drive all of your art and the value of your art, but also the overall art community, as the NFT art space and fine art space is elevated by the amazing work that you guys are doing and the amazing collaboration that you guys have going on within Light. So definitely think of yourself as your own personal influencer, as well as influencers for each other, as you guys look to build out community within this NFT collaboration. The other part within the NFT space is, and you might hear this on occasion, is the market threshold effects. It's really thinking about reach and frequency. It creates awareness within the space. So the more folks that you guys can reach about the messaging around your NFT collection, any of the work that you have being minted, any of the work that you have going on with Light, it is really important to make sure you understand how many people you're reaching with your message. That is why speaking and talking about and putting your brand out in market and reaching as many folks as possible with this message is really important. In the traditional world of marketing and advertising, what we typically talk about is how many people do we reach? How often do we need to reach them in order for us to get them to make a purchasing decision? So when marketers think about how they communicate to a customer about a product, that equation is always taken into account. So understanding your audience, how many of them you're reaching, how often you're reaching them will tell you what that reach and then the frequency in which you're reaching them is. So the higher that is, the more likely you are going to be to get them to actually purchase. And they'll always kind of be the point of diminishing return in that equation. But at this point, until you understand how many people you're reaching within your community and across the Light community, and how often you can do it, will only help you understand better how that community engagement should exist and how often you can get people to purchase. And then lastly is obviously community. Community is really meant to drive purpose and value for not only yourself, but as well as all the other either audiences that you're reaching or other artists that you're communicating with. It elevates all aspects of the industry. So participating within the community, not only your own personal social media communities, but again, as well as within the Light community, will help you get your message across, your personal brand across, and also help you elevate other artists within the space, and it should be a truly a group effort in kind of allowing everyone to rise all boats within this NFT space and educate the market on fine art photography and fine art as a whole, to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to be exposed to the amazing work that you're doing. Any other questions on the NFT space?
Yeah, Kim, there's a couple questions. Marcos has a couple of questions in here. He's one of them is he says, "How can I do all this and be authentic in a very informal environment of NFTs where people can smell manicured brands from a mile away?" I think you may have addressed some of this, but maybe you could reiterate a little.
Yeah, of course. So it is about defining that personal brand. So your personal brand, if you are true to yourself, it should come across. It should be the reflections of the who I am, what I'm doing, and why I'm doing it. If you communicate that in a way that is true to you, and to your audience, it should come across as and well received. At that point, you're no longer being unauthentic or overly manicured. The one area just to be aware of is that so many of you are creating very fine art. So communicating to people about the story and the emotion behind that fine art will help them feel like they have a more humanized version of you as well as your work and your brand, which will help it feel less manicured and more authentic to the community as a whole.
That's great. And then one other question from Marcos. He says, "Kim, can you talk about places where the personal brand of light artists might have synergies with the light brand, and how can we leverage that?"
So I'm guessing Marcos is trying to get at where personal brand overlaps with light. So that really comes down to the idea of community. Each individual and each of you will have your personal brands, and they will stand alone on your own personal websites, and you'll have now have strong bios that you guys can share not only on your own personal properties and your what we would like in the marketing world like to call your own assets, but then you can also cross promote them within the larger community. So for light, that would be things which I assume, and Marcos can correct me, but I would assume that would be things like your Discord, within Twitter. So again, hyping each other in an authentic way, like hype being a very NFT Web3 type of vernacular, but still hyping each other, building the community, participating with each other, and cross promoting each other's work, Light's work, within things like the Light Twitter, with the Light Twitter handle, within the Discord, within Instagram, will only help build the community and create the synergy between light and the light artists.
Excellent. And then one question from me is, how do you, or what's a good strategy for artists to ensure that they're, like you mentioned, they're on the correct vernacular for the audience, right? I think that one of the tendencies for photographers is to talk to other photographers and not to the consumers of the artwork. What's a good strategy for them to make sure they're directing their message to the proper end person?
So that's where researching your target audience when you're building out your brand, as well as when you're thinking about expanding your business into the NFT space, and participating in the community is going to become really important. That's all about kind of the competitive analysis. Your target audience analysis will help define what those are. So as you look at your target audience, whether it is your traditional collector versus your NFT collector, we'll keep it as simple as those two for right now. You'll then be able to go and find those folks, let's say on Twitter, in Discord, on Instagram. Follow hashtags as part of that research process when you're defining your audience and you're looking at your competitive set, to see how they're all communicating. One, how your audience communicates with each other, how they communicate from their own personal brand out to their own communities, and think about what words, what vernacular they use, how they present their passions and their values, so that again, you're communicating to them in a really authentic way, in a way that is well received. And the same thing applies obviously within the NFT and Web3 space as well. Finding though and learning about that lingo and that language that is used in areas like Discord that may be a little bit different than, let's say, more traditional social networks, will help you speak to the NFT audience and, let's say, the futurist in a way that connects with them. And again, elevates the overall fine art space as it enters into this NFT world.
Yeah. Here's another question from Benno. Benno says, "My clients hire me to shoot the architecture, interiors, and time lapse videos. My clients love my work, and I'm equally skilled in all those fields. But in the NFT space, I'm told to focus on one thing only, or my brand will be unclear, and I'll be sending out a confusing message to potential collectors. Is this a fact? Do I really have to pick just one thing, or be doomed to fail? This has been bothering me for years, to be honest, because I enjoy different types of art in equal measure. NFTs are making my dilemma a proper headache. I can't decide." Great question. That's awesome.
Phenomenal question, and love the way that you communicated it. So you obviously feel very connected to your personal brand, which is phenomenal. But I would say, from my experience, I wouldn't say that you should necessarily have to focus, but understanding what the focus based on each collection is or each collaboration is. So having the opportunity to have multiple collections over the course of time, or in market, is an opportunity for you. But thinking about if you're doing a collaboration, let's say with something like the community within Light, thinking about how you want your brand to be presented and what that focus is going to be for that specific collection and that specific collaboration is important, because you don't want to be confusing. You do not want to kind of muddy the water and make people feel that they're unconnected to, let's say, the overall collection or the overall community that's being built within each project. That is where the NFT space is a little different. It's there's a lot more project-based. These collaborations are stood up to kind of have an opportunity to be a little bit more focused. That doesn't mean that your personal brand and how it's reflected in the NFT space should necessarily have to be long term. It just means that you just need to be focused in each individual one.
Excellent. And I think we've got time for one more question. And this last question is from Marcos. I think it kind of sums up what I think a lot of people may be thinking. The question is, I do all this long-term branding, but my peers just do shilling and they're selling more than me. Should I change plans?
I do not. I am not a proponent of shilling. Shilling is not the world that I feel like we should necessarily live in and work in. It is a short-term tactic, not a long-term solution to building your brand and long-term success. Loyalty is built through that authenticity and that true authentic communication over time. That has proven to be successful for brands over centuries. It's how products and services have existed in all markets, from traditional through all the way to Web 1 to Web 2, and now in Web 3. I do not expect to see that change. Shilling is just going to be a short-term tactic to make short-term money. But in terms of long-term success in the space, I think that sticking to your brand and building it over time will be more successful.
Excellent. All right, I think that's all the questions, and we're at the top of the hour. Kim, I'll leave it to you to close us down.
Well, thank you all again for the time today. I hope that you guys found this to be helpful. If you do have any questions, feel free to email me. Here's my email address. Remember to focus in on developing your personal brand and being consistent. And I wish you guys all the best of luck. And I will be following along with Light.
All right. Thank you, Kim. We appreciate it. And
Everyone.
Once again, folks, this interview or this webinar has been recorded, and the replay will be sent out to you shortly. Everyone have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.